Hello, my name is Reed Silverne. The name of this show is Fed Pride. Reason it's called Fed Pride is because I'm a federal worker and proud of it. I was all prepared to talk about the Jack Abramoff scandal and the proposals for reform and all these other things. And then something happened that just boils my blood. And again, this is Friday. So you'll probably see me on Sunday or Tuesday. And that is that bin Laden has personally been authenticated in delivering a new audio tape, which was broadcast on Al Jazeera. And of course, we were forced to hear it on our own TV. I have to admit, last year, during the election, I am personally a Republican, although more of the McCain variety than the delay variety. And I basically said, and I said it to everybody I knew, that I would be happy to vote for Bush again if he brought back Osama bin Laden, dead or alive. He said that he would. That's what he said after Osama bin Laden ordered planes to go into the World Trade Center and the Pentagon and knocked those down. And eventually, or almost immediately, within a few hours, murdered 3,000 Americans. Now this guy has been proven and shown to be alive, to be well, and to be in good shape. And we have 18 to 20,000 troops in Afghanistan on that front. We have 160,000 troops in Iraq. And not only has Bush not brought back Osama bin Laden dead or alive, his head is not in a stick, but he seems to be in pretty good shape and able to put out audio tapes and to threaten we here in the United States. This is really upsetting to me. I was stationed in Europe when 9/11 happened. I was working in a building there. I won't go into any details. When we heard about the situation, I was expecting to be sent home, but nobody did send us home. The first plane could have been a wayward plane. I went downstairs and there was a widescreen TV down there, and I saw the second plane go into the building. Everybody gasped, and I was absolutely convinced that this was terrorism and that we were under attack and that this was war. A couple hours later, another plane went into the Pentagon, and I have to admit, I said, I'm going home. Everybody at work continued to work. And I went downstairs. I got euros out of the bank, and I went to the supermarket and got canned goods and who knows what else. I absolutely thought, and I have to admit, with some sense of panic, that we were at war and that Americans overseas were in danger. The next day, as a matter of fact, feds in the States were sent home. Our management, I guess, was not on the program. The next day, I called my boss and I said, are we supposed to go back to work? And she said, why not? So I did. I went to work the next day, and it took about a week for the security finally to catch up and to increase. They put fences around our building, soldiers with dogs, the whole thing. Security went up 100-fold. And it was just like, and almost as if we were in a war footing without a war. So I naturally expected that we would retaliate, and we did. And I have to give Bush and Cheney in an undisclosed location, and Tommy Franks, our general at the time, and Shinseki, a very, very good Joint Chiefs of Staff, credit for organizing an extremely effective counterinsurgency in Afghanistan, overthrowing the Taliban government. However, immediately our government went into this whole mode of how do we justify the war in Iraq? What did we do about Iraq? What do we do about or Saddam Hussein? And started dropping the ball. In fact, special forces were taken out of Afghanistan and Pakistan and were put into the Gulf in preparation for the war. And the war, by the war, I mean the war in Iraq, which is, of course, a major war and a big war. The following February, I believe that February 2002, after the Taliban fell, there was a battle in Tora Bora, which was a series of caves in Afghanistan, and whoever was in charge of that particular operation put a lot of the locals on the program instead of Americans, didn't put a screening force on the border, and basically, while they may have wounded Osama bin Laden, he got away. Nobody took a fall for it. Nobody took any blame for it. And all of a sudden, we're going to get Osama bin Laden. That was the line. Became, oh, it doesn't matter who leads Al-Qaeda, they're on the run. And that was in 2002. That was the line for the next couple of years. Now we have bin Laden putting out a tape. Apparently the tape was made in December, and we know that from some of the allusions in the tape to news stories and so on and so forth. It seems like there has been some activity trying to get Al-Qaeda in Pakistan and in Iraq, or in Afghanistan, where there was a Predator plane, came down, there was some intelligence that the number 2 man, in fact, the operational leader of Al-Qaeda, probably the guy that actually gave the orders, Ayman al-Zawahiri, was going to be at a dinner in his honor with his brother-in-law at a sheikh that was friendly. A sheikh is a local leader or a clan leader. He wasn't there. And Predator came in, flattened 3 buildings, lots of civilians, of course, who really is a civilian in that case. However, the guy who was in charge of chemical and biological weapons for Al-Qaeda, he was killed. The guy who was in charge of the battle in the Afghan province right over the border in that area, he was killed. And the guy who may have been in charge, kind of generally, of the Taliban insurgency across the border in Afghanistan, he was killed too. So it was an effective raid. However, it was embarrassing in the sense that civilians were killed. The Al-Qaeda people came in, pulled the bodies of their people away, so that when the Pakistanis showed up, the foreign fighters were gone. And there were bodies of women and children and sheikhs and who knows what else in these being pulled out of these 3 buildings. So a couple days later, all of a sudden, here is this tape that gets to Al Jazeera, and Al Jazeera immediately puts on TV, and basically has Osama's voice, and he says that my message to you is about the war in Iraq and Afghanistan and how to end them. Of course, he wants to end them by having us give up. Said the lack of Al-Qaeda attacks in the United States since September 11th was not related to improved security, and pointed out the terrorist attacks in Europe as evidence of these fighters could penetrate all such barriers. As to what attacks the Americans can expect, Osama bin Laden said, the operations are under preparation and you will see them in your homes the minute they are through with God's permission, he said. Well, I have to admit, I take that as a threat, and I would think 3 years after 9/11, if Bush and his administration, if our military, the greatest military in the world, if our government and our intelligence services, I would hope the greatest in the world, were on this program and on this issue 100% of the time, which I would expect after this man has murdered 3,000 Americans, that this guy would be caught by now. And I have to admit, I'm pretty upset that George Bush, who promised me and you that Osama bin Laden would be brought to justice, dead or alive, that Osama bin Laden is not only alive, but that he's making tapes threatening me 3 years later. And I have to admit, I want the Bush administration, I want my government, I want the military, I want the Pentagon, I want the intelligence agencies, I want everybody involved with protecting this country. I want the Homeland Administration, and I want them to go out and put every other thing down, and I want them to get Osama bin Laden and kill him or capture him and bring him back to justice and bring him back to this country if he's not dead. And I have to admit, and I have to say it right now, I want this done now. I want this done 3 years ago, but since it wasn't done 3 years ago, and since the ineptness and the lack of focus and the inability to say, this is the ball, let's stay on the ball, and let's get the ball, and let's get the touchdown or whatever you want to call it if you want to bring that particular metaphor to its completion. I want that done now, and I don't want anybody doing anything else. I don't know about the rest of everybody, but that's where I'm at. And now we go to the other thing that I was going to talk about, which is the fact that Congress in 1978 set up a system so that to protect our country, we can do secret wiretaps and get approval from a secret court. And not only could we do it, but we could get approval from the secret court even after the secret court or even after the events have been completed. So if they want to go and swamp through everybody's emails, everybody's calls, and then focus in on certain individuals, and then wiretap those individuals, and then take action on those, after it's all done, they can go to this court, and this court can approve wiretaps. However, a program was put together, and now I'm not sure whether I'm for it or against it, for the National Security Administration or agency to be able to do this kind of wiretapping and do this kind of surveillance, which I have no problem with, and which I support completely, but without the court orders, without the warrants. Now, the argument is, and the argument I have to admit is a little bit scary, although we have to settle it against the fact that bin Laden is still out there, and he's still out there because we haven't captured him. And we haven't captured him partially because this program didn't work. And basically, there's been a lot of criticism when this came out because the president himself said that there would be no domestic wiretapping without a court order. And of course there was. Did he know about it? Yes, he did. Now that's very, very clear. So there was a congressional research report, and that's an agency that's controlled by Congress, not by the executive agency, that said basically there's no legal justification for not just going in after the fact, after you've done what you need to do to protect the people, after wiretapping, after getting translations of what was wiretapped, after doing whatever you need to do, and then getting a retroactive warrant. So basically the president is saying, I have been given the authority to do basically whatever I want in order to protect the American people. That would be great, but this particular authority came about in the wake of 9/11 and with the authority to deal with the terrorists and to use forces necessary against the terrorists 3 days after 9/11. Now, the Congressional Research Service makes it very, very clear that it was not the intent of Congress to change this law and to give the president an open and unlimited carte blanche to wiretap any American citizen, no matter where they are. The NSA program was justified by a resolution passed by Congress 3 days after September 11, authorizing the use of force against those responsible for the terrorist acts. Research Service found there was no indication that Congress intended to authorize warrantless wiretaps when it gave President Bush the authority to fight Al-Qaeda and to invade Afghanistan. The President made it clear that he will exercise all authority available to him, consistent with the Constitution, to protect the people of the United States, the report said. And it added, places the President at the zenith of his powers by authorizing the NSA activities. Now, the question is, what authority was the President given? And if he was given that authority, did it help catch Osama bin Laden? Well, I have to admit, if Osama bin Laden's head was brought back to this country on a stick 3 months after we invaded Afghanistan, I probably would have said in retrospect, whatever you did to make that happen was fine. However, Osama bin Laden is well. He's fine. He's in Pakistan somewhere, and he's threatening me. So how effective was this program? And is the only impact of the result of 9/11 the fact that the president was given unlimited powers to do whatever he wants? However, those powers that he was given were not effective enough to catch Osama bin Laden or his Zawahiri. And this is, first of all, it's been a pet peeve of mine for the last 3 years, because every day I've woken up and I've thought, well, gee, I hope I open up the paper, I hope I turn on Fox News Network, and there will be the report that says Osama bin Laden is dead. And even though there were a couple false alarms, Osama bin Laden was never found dead. He was never killed by our efforts, and he was never brought to justice, dead or alive. So that leads us to stop and think. Basically, the Foreign Intelligence Act passed by Congress in 1978 to the Watergate era political abuses. Some presidential powers, this is the assertion of the Justice Department in answer to these critics in the Congressional Research Service, particularly in the area of national security, are simply beyond Congress's ability to regulate. That is the assertion that's made by the Attorney General as far as the rights and powers given to the President in the wake of 9/11. However, and I might even understand that if it was working, but it's 3 years later, and Osama bin Laden is loose, and the President of the United States says that he has powers related to national security that can't even be regulated by Congress. Now, I wish I had a copy of the Constitution in front of me, because the Constitution doesn't say that at all. It says that Congress has oversight powers over the executive branch, and that includes time of war and time of peace. It does give the president powers as commander-in-chief over the military, and I absolutely am 100% for that. However, I would like to know whether the president has unlimited powers and was given unlimited powers 3 days after 9/11. So it would be 9/14. And if he did, where in the Constitution is he given unlimited powers? Now, we have had a president in the past who suspended habeas corpus, called a state of emergency throughout the country, and threw a lot of people in jail. And of course, that was a terrible national emergency. And that president backed up on that and canceled that when the war was over. That war was a civil war, and that war had an enemy 50 miles from Washington, D.C., right across the border in Virginia. And on top of that, all kinds of spies and who knows what else in Washington itself. I don't know. Is this the danger that we face? And if so, at least President Lincoln went on public when he suspended habeas corpus and did whatever he did. And he was criticized quite a bit and almost lost the election in 1864. If this is a situation that we're in, that's fine. But one thing that President Lincoln did that George Bush did not, and his administration did not, is he pursued the enemy. He went out there and invaded the South. And not only did he invade the South, but every single general that failed, he fired. So why wasn't Tommy Franks fired when Osama bin Laden got away in February of 2002? And everybody involved in that particular operation. How come all of a sudden it didn't matter whether Osama bin Laden was caught? It didn't matter whether Osama bin Laden was brought home and was brought to justice, dead or alive. And I'm quoting President Bush. Brought to justice, dead or alive. Now, I want to see that happen, and I want to see it now. I don't think it's necessary to not go get a court-ordered warrant retroactively in order to do that. I think that I don't see why there's only 18,000 troops in Afghanistan, right near where Osama bin Laden is. I don't see why there's not 30,000 troops or 50,000 troops or special forces spread throughout Pakistan, where Osama bin Laden supposedly is, looking for him right now. I think, and I'm hoping that I'm wrong, because I'm hoping there'll be another Predator strike in a week or tomorrow that takes out Osama bin Laden. But I'm not going to hold my breath. And I'm not going to hold my breath because I'm not convinced that the Bush administration is trying hard enough. Because it's 3 years later, and Osama bin Laden is alive and issuing fatwas and issuing tapes to Al Jazeera and getting on TV and radio and threatening my life. And I'm a little bit upset about that. And I'm at the point now, 3 years after 9/11, that I'm blaming Bush. I'm blaming the administration because they didn't finish the job that they said that they would finish, and that they swore they would finish, and that they promised me that they would finish. They promised the American people, but he personally promised me. And it's 3 years later, and it's not done. And we're somewhere else. I'm for the overthrowing Saddam Hussein, but why did we do it while Osama bin Laden was alive and well? Is Al-Qaeda on the run? I was in Russia when they blew up the subway. I was in Europe when they blew up Madrid, and it was still being done. So I have to admit, I am a little bit upset about it. I would like to be able to get on TV next week and say, boy, they got Osama bin Laden. And I certainly hope and pray, because I believe in our folks in uniform, that they want to do that. And that given the resources, they will. And that will be fine. My name is Reed Silverne. The name of this show is Fed Pride. Reason it's called Fed Pride is because I'm a federal worker and proud of it. I'm on Sundays and Tuesdays, and I hope that you watch me again. Thank you very much.